Page 2 now. Weak Republicans' weak response to the weak mainstream media is utterly unbelievable. How spineless many members of the GOP truly are. The president is being viciously attacked by the mainstream media, and all these selfish, self-serving Republican members of Congress can do is worry about themselves. They don't care about the truth. All they care about is being reelected in 2018. The proof is in their tweets.
Be clear, white supremacy is repulsive. This bigotry is counter to all this country stands for. There can be no moral ambiguity. Mr. President, you can't allow white supremacists to share only part of blame. They support ideas which cost nation and world so much pain. There's no moral equivalency between racists and Americans standing up to defy hate and bigotry. The President of the United States should say so. Blaming both sides for Charlottesville? No. Back to relativism when dealing with KKK, Nazi sympathizers, white supremacists? Just no. We must speak out clearly against the hatred, racism, and white supremacists who descended upon Charlottesville. White supremacy, bigotry, and racism have absolutely no place in our society, and no one, especially POTUS, should ever tolerate it.
Simply amazing. These phony politicians should be standing with President Trump united because, number one, he's correct, and number two, the president is being assaulted by the left. And what these fools, they are fools, what they don't see is that trying to distance themselves from the president will not insulate them from being attacked by the same political enemies that are assaulting the president of the United States. In other words, they should stand up and fight like men and women. Joining me now from our bureau in Washington, D.C., spokeswoman for Americans for Limited Government, Jessie Jane Duff. Jessie, we expect this, of course, these attacks from the mainstream media. But these Republican members of Congress who are piling on Donald Trump, they ought to be ashamed of themselves. But then again, we saw this 3 decades ago with Ronald Reagan. They abandoned Ronald Reagan when times were tough with him as well, until, of course, the economy turned around and everything became rosy. And these people, they ought to consider resigning from the Republican Party, possibly resigning from Congress in and of itself. Donald Trump is the de facto leader of the Republican Party, whether you like it or not. He's president of the United States. These people should either stand with him or get out of the way.
Oh, you just took the words out of my mouth. There's no need for me to be here. I celebrate everything you just said. The reality is we're watching people like Marco Rubio and Paul Ryan quickly run to the left again because they seem to think that they're going to get reelected on that. Well, I got news for you, Marco Rubio. You couldn't even win Florida when you were running for president. So what makes you think taking a stand against Donald Trump, who swept Donald Trump, I dare say, swept your state? He swept your state, and you were standing on the sidelines realizing, oh my goodness, there's something to this man. Why can't you get some backbone? 1 second you're with him, the next second you're not. Everything President Trump said was on point. He is calling out these radical groups like Antifa, Black Lives Matter. At the same time, he never equated them to the radicals of the KKK or white supremacists. He clearly stated we must stay away from these extremist groups, these groups that are hating based upon race and all of the other undignified things that we should be doing. You know what happened in Charlotte? We gave those darn groups airtime. Had the people who opposed them not even shown up, they would have faded off into the sunset with nobody there to give them any type of celebration or any type of attention. Instead, it became a media circus when Antifa, the Black Lives Matter, and then just probably genuinely nice people like myself decide to go down there and see what's going on. What do you end up having? Riots. You got people banging each other with baseball bats, and they're on both sides. President Trump didn't say anything wrong. And we know that President Obama never called out any of the riots that were going on his watch. And why hasn't the left called out Antifa that caused riots in Berkeley, buildings to be destroyed, fires and arson, all of these things that have gone on, and the left has yet to come out and call out their radical alt-left? So It's a double-edged sword, and I'm sorry to see that the president has to go through this.
All right, well, I don't think you need me at this point, but I'll add to that a little bit. And that is, thank goodness for social media these days, because we do have the truth.
Yes.
Because clearly what the mainstream media is doing here is reporting one side of the story. I've had to explain this to several people outside of my job, that the mainstream media is explaining only one half of the story. And that's what the mainstream media has been guilty of for decades. Back when I was a member of the mainstream media, they would only report half of the story. But now, because of social media and alternative media like this program, we know there's another side to this story. We know that the alt-left, we know Antifa came there with a purpose, and that is to cause a problem. It's not excusing the murder that took place and this maniac that got behind the wheel of this automobile and killed this woman and injured in the neighborhood of 20 others. No excuse for that whatsoever. That is a crime. But there were other crimes perpetrated on innocent people that day that came from the alt-left, and that's what the president is trying to say.
Absolutely. And the fact of the matter is, I was on BBC today, and they still tried to suggest that the president was tied to these groups. And I said, how many times does he have to say it? He has said it for over 2 years, that he disavows the KKK. He disavows white extremism. And then David Duke runs around giving him kudos today, and people blame the president for this. Again, when you have radicalism on the left or you have radicalism on the right, in fact, I don't even like calling it right because I consider myself a conservative. When you have radicals, period, you cannot blame the president for people who are foaming at the mouth, and then you have the media that is just chomping at the bit to find fault with him. Because I watched that press conference and I reread the transcripts, and they were never satisfied. He had to say the same answer over and over again. They wanted to trip him up. And then they start making it about Robert E. Lee. First of all, it's not about the general. It never was about the general. Aside from the few protesters that showed up to have peaceful protests for this monument being taken down, and they had a permit to do such. After that, it was sure mayhem and chaos. And he had a right to say, hey, hold up here. Do not suggest that this has been people that support me versus people that support the left. This is about people who are looking for trouble. And the media wanted to find some fault with him, no matter what he does. And I find it reprehensible. Listen, Americans, this is a man who has taken this job free of charge. He is not even taking a paycheck. How often do we even hear about that? That he won't even take a paycheck because he loves this country enough to go in there and serve it. With that said, under his administration, ICE has prosecuted more neo-Nazis and white extremists than any other administration in the history of the United States. That press release is dated August 10th by ICE. It came out, and no media is covering it, that his administration has prosecuted white extremism. So if this man is such a white extremist or tied to white extremists, it's only because people are desperately trying to tie him to that, as they were to Russia. I'm ashamed of all of these people on the left who would rather see President Trump fail than this country succeed.
Again, the media is doing selective reporting on this. For example, they won't even tell their viewers and their listeners and the people who read their publications who actually had the permits in Charlottesville and who did not. And it was the good law-abiding Americans, not the neo-Nazis, who had the permit. It just reminds me, by the way, of the Rodney King video. You know, we saw that latter half of the Rodney King video, but we never saw the precursor. And the precursor is important, and what precipitated the events in Charlottesville, Virginia, is important because it dovetails into this attack on our culture, not unlike what is happening right now in Los Angeles. Roll tape.
Dueling petitions have now targeted this Confederate monument. A Change.org petition wants the monument removed, claiming that, quote, history has looked back and determined the Confederacy's racist and bigoted actions as traitorous. There's no reason to celebrate them. But the United Daughters of the Confederacy, which purchased the grave plots and then deeded them to individual veterans, says, quote, Confederate monuments are under attack, and the purge won't end until every monument from all American wars are gone. Thomas Jefferson and George Washington were both slave owners, and their monuments will be next.
Never words more prophetic than that, Jesse, because now in Chicago there is a call to remove a monument and a statue to George Washington and a park named after George Washington. So the president, again, was correct. Who is next? What is next as part of our culture and this whitewashing of American history?
You know, the one thing about George Washington is he was one of the creators of this country. He fought so diligently and hard to ensure that the foundation that we have today, the freedoms that we have today, are set in stone. He was the author of the Declaration of Independence. For us to sit there now and start going after the monument of the man that helped create this country, as flawed and scarred and as bruised as we are, we must celebrate that this man and those founding fathers, such as Thomas Jefferson, had the moral fortitude to stand up and set up a country that could be as strong as it is today. With that said, why do we have monuments in Seattle of Stalin? Why do we have monuments that are throughout this country that other people could find offensive? They've gone after Christopher Columbus, for goodness sake. You cannot grade the men of that era by today's standard. As reprehensible as slavery was and is, because it still goes on today, it has gone on for thousands of years. It has been the culture, part of the culture of almost every country on this planet. There's few that had gone unscathed. And we still have human trafficking, and we still have people that are under dire conditions throughout this world. The reality is that having those monuments up, if you want to move them, that is up to the individual city. If Charlottesville said, hey, we want to move Robert E. Lee, and let's have it in a Confederate memorial, let's have it at a Confederate cemetery or even a museum, I can appreciate the citizens of that city or even of that state making those decisions. But for outsiders to come in and rabble-rouse and turn up the volume and the heat, declaring how offended they are when they have never even walked by that statue in their entire life, what next?
Yep.
I'm here in Washington, D.C. There's not a plaza in the city that doesn't have another monument.
Thomas Jefferson, when he was inscribing the words of the Declaration of Independence, knew that he was writing the death knell of slavery in this country. They couldn't tackle it at that time during the birth of this country, but he knew, and others knew, that eventually it would be tackled and we would end slavery in this country because of our founding documents, including the Declaration of Independence. And what the left is right now is nothing more than political arsonists. And what they're doing is setting fires to this country, stepping back and watching the ugly results. Jesse, thank you.